For me, the question really is, where do you draw the line? Okay, where do you draw that line? In the traditional IT, all of those things are under your control. You control what application you run, you control how often you back up your data, you control how often you replace the server, how often you run your antivirus, how often you run your backups. You have all that control. If you now draw a line and say, o yan, yung mga servers, kung kailan papalitan yan, kung kailan sa service yan, ayoko na problemahin yan. And you draw the line of the OS, then you're saying that you're running something called infrastructure as a service. If you now say, I want to even outsource more stuff, but not the data, because I want to encrypt the data, I want to be able to say how often it's backed up, then you're doing platform as a service. And over at the other extreme, where everything is now virtual, it's transparent, you have software as a service. So where do you draw the line? Is another question you have to ask yourself. And so this is the money slide, or this is hopefully the slide that you print out and put on your desk. Because this ties up those two things that we talked about. Where do you put the data and apps? You do it on-premise in a private cloud, off-premise on a private cloud. You do a hybrid, or do you do a public? And where do you draw the line? Platform, infrastructure, or software as a service. And this matrix will define your cloud migration strategy. For example, let's say there's a government agency that's now got everything on-premise. Tax and finance, disaster, malware, and so on. You might define your migration strategy to the cloud to look like the next slide. Which is, let's put our HR system, continue on-premise, but our citizen relationship management, we can do infrastructure as a service, disaster response, maybe you want to do platform as a service, you just want to be able to access it no matter where the disaster has occurred. And things like email, well, let's just do it on software as a service. You don't really care how often it's backed up, you don't really care if it's encrypted, but we're willing to let a cloud vendor handle those details. That decision is up to you. For example, a defense department, defense agency would have a different set of applications. What would their migration strategy look like? Obviously, weapons analysis, leave it there, on-premise. That data we don't want to leak out. Things like logistics, also on-premise, but maybe instead of building it ourselves, you can already buy it. Procurement, recruiting, again, disaster relief. That's the best application or platform as a service, because when you're responding to a disaster, you really don't want to worry about where your servers are or the data. Then, of course, again, unclassified email. Our defense agencies have classified email, and probably that network is not connected to the internet. Okay, but they also have unclassified email. So again, this is one possible migration strategy. When you draw up your migration strategy, you will be asking yourself many questions, and that's why we have 4 workshops this afternoon. Do you know which workshop you're attending? Have you decided already? Workshop 1 and 2 are happening at the same time, so kailangan mamili kayo. Okay, workshop 1 is about risk analysis. What are the risks when you put your stuff on the cloud? There's the risk na baka mag-bankrupt yung cloud provider na yun. There's a financial risk. There's a legal risk. There's also a portability risk. What happens at the end? If I'm not satisfied with them, malilipat ko ba yung data to another cloud provider? Are they using standards, okay, that allow me to do that transfer? So that's workshop 1, risks. Workshop 2 is about data. It's very important to validate what my friend said earlier. Is it really 80-20? Or is it 60-40? Or 50-50? Okay? Not yet. How much of your data is sensitive or classified? And as we know, Senate Bill 2965 has passed the BICAM, and President Aquino is poised to sign that bill. So what is the impact of that? So hopefully, if there are 2 of you from the same agency, maybe you can split up. One of you can go to workshop 1, the other can go to workshop 2. Hopefully we get an even split. Para hindi naman ako larangamin din sa workshop 2. Sabay na rin? Yes. Ask more at the same time. Okay, baka lang nawin ako doon. Workshop 2, ha? When you come to workshop 2, at the end of workshop 2, you will give me a number. Because you're the one who will decide whether your data is sensitive, classified, high impact. Okay? So hopefully some of you, di naman kailangan lahat sa workshop 2. Because at the end of workshop 2, we will share our findings with all of you. Just like you in workshop 1 will share the findings with the rest, workshop 3 will share the findings with the rest. Workshop 3 is more about procurement. No, because this cloud thing is a new thing. Kasi sinasabi natin na we're paying for this, pero we're not really getting it. Because you're supposed to be paying for what you use, pay per use. Baka naman sobrang binabayad mo. And how do you audit that you're actually getting what you're paying for? Okay, so procurement issues, if that's your concern, workshop 3. And finally, workshop 4 is the economic model. How do you know you're really saving money for the agency? Maybe it's really cheaper just to do it in-house. How do you structure your various cloud contracts? Because you may not have just one cloud provider, you may have several. Okay, I wanted to cover the data privacy law a little bit para naman nainganyo kayo pupunta sa workshop. Okay, there's this section called personal information. What does it say? Unauthorized processing of personal information shall be penalized 1 to 3 years in jail, minimum of 1 year, and a fine of 500,000 to 2 million pesos. So if someone, hopefully not one of you, but some contractor, some person walks into your office and gets that data and uses it maliciously, we catch it, those raise penalties. But take a look at clause B. The unauthorized processing of personal sensitive information. So, iba yung personal information, iba yung personal sensitive information. 3 years to 6 years in jail, 500,000 to 4 million pesos. So, it doubles the penalty. Kung ginamit mo yung data maliciously, kung ikaw yung gumamit ng data maliciously. What about you say, I never used it maliciously, okay? But you were negligent. Because the system that you define, the place where you put the data, allow some malicious person to use it. That's the next page. Accessing information due to negligence. Okay. 1 to 3 years and 500,000 to 2 million on persons who, due to negligence, provided access to personal information. Okay. That sounds like something that would get to the core of what you do as CIOs. Are you adequately providing safeguards for the data in your data centers? And if it's sensitive personal information, ayun, doble ulit. 3 to 6 years, 500,000 to 4 million pesos. Okay. But let's say now, yes, I really safeguarded. I selected my cloud provider, very accurately. But now, at the end of the contract with your cloud provider, did you get the data back? Who owns the data? Did you undergo proper disposal of personal information? Okay, then you have to make sure because some cloud vendors, they say, the data is mine. At the end of that, well, I'll give you a copy, pero matitira sa akin yung documents na kasi I'll do some data mining on it. And if that data is accessed, again, 6 months to 2 years fine. If it's personal, and if it's sensitive personal, 1 to 3 years fine. So it really becomes very important to pick your cloud provider carefully. In fact, the industry is revolving now around what we call now the 4 pillars of trust. The 4 questions that you should ask. Okay, the 4 bullets that you should fire at any cloud provider. Number 1, privacy. Ask your cloud provider, do you respect my privacy? Tinitin nyo ba yung data ko? Maybe personally, hindi nyo tinitingnan, but do you have a data miner, that goes through it and shows ads based on what's in your email? So, privacy is very important. Second, transparency. Can you ask your cloud provider, nasa ba yung data ko? Nasa Singapore ba? Nasa Thailand? Nasa Chicago? Okay. And your cloud provider should be able to answer that. Sino bang nag-access? what type